from the United Kingdom to the United Kingdom to Sudevi Dasi. And actually, I'm really excited to introduce Sudevi. Firstly, because I thought she was going to be a difficult one to catch. I had to do a lot of persuading to overcome her shyness. And finally, she agreed, which was beautiful, because actually she has so much to offer. And the shy ones are always the best ones, yeah, in my opinion. And I can really embarrass Sudevi here, because of course I've known her since she was 6 years old. She's Budara's daughter. I first met her up in Scotland when she was only 6 and Lali was 4, I think. And I have to say, she's always been a super bright person, intelligent. And I also wanted to sort of honor Budara here, because he's actually he and Pandita managed to bring up 2 children in the most beautiful way, where Krishna consciousness wasn't ever shoved down their throats. It was always done in a very conscious, but very liberal way. So they've grown up in an environment where Krishna consciousness was something interesting as opposed to something coerced. And it's testament to Budara Pandita that Sudevi and Lali have both grown up being very at home and very beautiful with their Krishna consciousness. It's wonderful to see. So I'm really excited to introduce Sudevi, who first met Srila Guru. I actually only found this out yesterday. I didn't realize this. I thought she met Gurudev in 1996 on his first tour, but actually Budara went to India, took darshan from Srila Gurudev in 1989, and Sudevi was a baby then, literally in her first year, and she got darshan in 1989. Knowing Sudevi, she probably remembers it as well. But no, so she's shaking her head, she didn't. So very happy you've agreed to speak, Sudevi, Didi, and I hand over to you, and please share with us your memories and your realizations of Srila Gurudev. Thank you. Haribol.
Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shishimad Bhaktivedanta Narayani Namine. I offer my heartfelt Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my dear Srila Gurudev, Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pada Stota Sata Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and to all of my Shiksha Gurus through whom he continues to guide me in all ways. I am a bit nervous, so please excuse me. But I think probably what I am about to say follows on quite nicely from Ramananda's Puspanjali, because he met Gurudev in Holland in 1996, and then he came over to England, which is when I had my first proper darshan of Gurudev. It was, I guess, May 96, and my father took me to meet Srila Gurudev in London. My mother and my sister stayed at home preparing the place, because in a few days' time Gurudev would come to visit us in our house. And we went somewhere, I don't know where it was, maybe Radler, somewhere near Watford. And my first memory of Srila Gurudev is walking into the room. It was like a small hall where he was staying. And similar to what Ramananda described, like there wasn't really anyone around. I remember everyone was just outside chatting. Vrinda and Tungavidya were in the kitchen cooking. And then Gurudev was sitting in this armchair in the hall. There were these windows behind him, but I remember walking in, and even though the light was shining in from the windows, it actually felt as though the light was shining out from Gurudev. He was sitting there so peacefully. There was, I think, 1 or 2 devotees sat in front of him, singing some bhajans, one person on a mridanga, and everything else was peaceful. There was no one around. And I walked in, paid obeisances, and he looked at me, and I remember this feeling similar to what Ramananda had, of where he said, "Oh, this is my Gurudev." I didn't think of it in those words, but it was this feeling of Gurudev knowing me and me somehow knowing him and him looking at me like he was so happy to see me, not because I was some random person that came in, but like me specifically, like he knew me and he was welcoming me. And that made a really big impression. And a few days later, Gurudev came to our house. I stayed in London for a few days attending the Harikatha with my dad, and then he came to our house in Bath. And I think we were expecting that it was just going to be Gurudev's entourage and the local devotees that came. But actually something like, I don't know, probably Shodanandan can confirm, but I think it was something like 50 devotees just turned up at our door, like people we didn't even know, pulled up. They were sleeping in their cars on the streets, camping in the park across the road. It was like a whole circus had come to town. And I think in a way it was probably quite stressful for the neighbors and my parents, but it was also an amazing sign of like the spectacular thing that was about to come. We hadn't expected that. Because from that moment on, wherever Gurudev went, it would be like that. There'd be waves of devotees that appear out of nowhere, having heard that there's this amazing, amazing Vaishnav in town. And he was only at our house for 2 days. And I remember, I think on the second morning or first morning, my mother, we'd had a few darshans with him. Gurudev and Maharaja was staying, who was Naveen Krishna at the time, they were staying in mine and my sister's bedroom, which we were like completely thrilled about. And we had a few darshans in our room with him. And then after that, my mother came out of the room one day and asked my sister and I if we'd like to take initiation. I was 7 at the time and my sister was 5. And I remember only having to like think about it for a split second. And there really wasn't anything to think about. I think in a way, I've always thought that I was kind of glad that that opportunity was presented to me at an age before any sort of like mental debate could have entered, because it just meant it was a, I don't know, an intuitive heart thing. But we said yes, almost immediately. And I think we went in to have initiation at that very moment. And we walked into Gurudev's room, our bedroom, and sat down, and it was just my parents and my sister and I. Gurudev gave us the Maha Mantra, told me to chant 2 rounds in the morning before school, 2 rounds in the afternoon after school. My sister was only 5 and she knew how to chant the Maha Mantra, but he was so sweet. He said to her that if the Maha Mantra was too difficult for her to chant, she could just chant Govinda, Govinda, Govinda on every beat, and that would count as her round. But from the very moment that he gave us initiation, Srila Gurudev, the very next thing he asked us is, what is Krishna doing right now? And the entire time that he stayed with us, every time he saw us, he would ask my sister that, what is Krishna doing right now? The first time he asked us that, my sister got so nervous. She just, all she did was she blurted out, monkeys! And Gurudev just burst into laughter. I just remember that so clearly. He really, really loved that answer. But from the very beginning, he was just looking past whatever bodies we've come in, whatever karma we've come to this world with, whatever age we were, and just trying to connect us to a constant like remembrance, but not just remembrance, like actual presence with Krishna, with his pastimes, and with the residents of Goloka Vrindavan. Because I remember that very trip that he made to our house, that was when my mother told me what Gurudev's speciality was, and she said that he's telling us about Srimati Radhika, and he's told us that actually she's even more important than Krishna. And I remember that took a little bit for my head, like I couldn't quite get my head around that at first. I mean, it made complete sense, but I remember having this feeling of feeling a little bit bad for Krishna, like, oh, he's not the star of the show. But then it only took like a couple classes of hearing Srila Gurudev speaking about Srimati Radhika and the classes he was giving at the time for me to realize, like, oh no, that's completely true. And Gurudev did exactly that. He opened Goloka Vrindavan up to us in ways that, speaking for myself, I can't even begin to fathom. But he did create that opening on a whole new level. I actually read a quote that I wrote down from Gurudev last night, where he was speaking in Australia in 1998, and he said, he was telling different pastimes, and then he said that he actually wasn't sure that any of us would understand even a tiny bit of it in 100,000 lifetimes, but still he is telling us everywhere anyway. And that's the the immense compassion and the incredible beauty of Srila Gurudev, that it didn't matter whether we were qualified or not. It didn't matter what kind of jiva we are and what we're living through. He gave anyway. And after he said that, he said, we should not try to understand this with our minds, or nor should we speculate on it. Only we should try to meditate on these pastimes with faith. And when I read that again last night, I was thinking about how that was Gurudev's whole purpose and whole intention, was to take Krishna consciousness and bring it down to a heart level. To wake up in the morning and think, what is Krishna doing right now? To walk through your day and think, what is Krishna doing right now? Like, what is happening in that space? And in doing that, to actually become a part of it, even though we have to live through so much else in this world. And one massive way that Gurudev opened that doorway to Goloka up for us was through Vrajmandal Parikram. And it was huge. I think that's probably one of Gurudev's really significant contributions to our experience of Krishna consciousness, was that he took us around Vrindavan and Braj and introduced the pastime to us in this really tangible way of giving us a place and a memory to go with it. So even though the pastime places don't look like, to our vision, what they actually look like, it's something. It's something for us to meditate on. It's something for us to connect to. And so I was really fortunate, I don't know by what mercy, that I got to have a few experiences of parikram with Gurudev from a young age. We went in 96, but then we just went for the last few days of Kartik. And then in 97, I did my first full parikram with Srila Gurudev. At that point, I was 9 years old. And I remember there are a few little memories that I just thought I'd share, because as Ramananda pointed out, it's nice to hear them, that made an impression on me from that parikram. One of them was realizing, the moment I realized that Gurudev could hear me and knew exactly what I was thinking and the state of my heart as well, because it was in Mathura, and Srila Gurudev would give Harikatha, and after Harikatha he would walk upstairs to his room. In 96 his room was downstairs, but I remember him going upstairs to his room in 97, and everyone would gather around and follow him from the temple room to the stairs. And I remember that each night he would pick a different young boy to rest his arm on. He'd have his one arm on Madhav Maharaj and the other arm on some boy that he picked from the crowd. And it was usually like Shravan or Govardhan, or someone who was probably 13, 14 years old and exactly the right height for Gurudev to rest on as he walked up the stairs. And every day that he did that, I remember thinking, oh, I wish it was me. He's not going to do it because I'm a girl, but I wish it was me. I wish I could offer my shoulder to him for him to lean on. And I didn't tell anyone about it. I was just thinking about it, kind of hoping every time that he would pick me. And even though I was only 9 at the time, I was insanely tall, and taller than most of the boys anyway. And then one day, out of nowhere, Gurudev looks at me and he just puts his arm on my shoulder. And I got to be the one that walked him up the stairs. And I remember being in such shock, because I was a girl and he would never do that, and all these things. But I felt in that like he was making such a strong point to tell me that he hears everything I think. He knows what my desires are, and he will actually go beyond the boundaries of what culture and custom dictates in order to help me have that realization, to help me grow my faith in him. And that was really, I guess that was really important to him, that he wanted us to actually grow in faith, like he was saying, to meditate on these pastimes in faith. And that faith in Krishna and these pastimes comes from having faith in Srila Gurudev and having faith in who he is and how he understands us, and how we are bound to him in a way that is beyond all like intellectual understanding. I've always struggled sometimes to explain my relationship to Srila Gurudev to my friends who aren't devotees. Several of them have met him, some took initiation, and there were many others who I wanted to meet him, but I found it hard to take something as subtle and yet tangible and deep and completely unexplainable and explain it to someone who doesn't really know what it is to have someone like Gurudev in our lives. Not just Gurudev, but Sri Guru and the Vaishnavas, like these incredible personalities whose entire presence on this planet is to do just that, to grow our faith, and in growing our faith, to connect us more and more to Goloka Vrindavan. And I had, it wasn't just his Western disciples and devotees that Gurudev opened the world to Goloka Vrindavan for, and it wasn't just them that he made an impression on while in Braj. In 2013, I went to Govardhan for the first time since 2010. I brought some university friends to India and I wanted to take them on Govardhan Parikrama with a rickshaw. And I was actually a bit nervous of going back, because the last place I'd seen Gurudev with my eyes was in Govardhan, and I didn't know how I was going to feel about going back. And the very first place the rickshaw stopped was Kusum Sarovar, which is a place I personally love, and I really associate it with Gurudev. I always feel Gurudev very strongly there. But I was walking around and I was feeling a bit depressed and a bit confused. And sorry, it was 2014, not 2013. And then this older Indian Babaji started trying to talk to me. And at first I was a bit dismissive, because as a young woman in India, you get talked to a lot, and my sort of go-to is a sort of defensive, I'm not talking to anyone kind of thing. But he kept trying to speak to me, and then I sort of gave in and I started talking to him. And he, of his own accord, started glorifying Srila Gurudev without any knowledge of who I was. And he told me that he was the Pujari at Kusum Sarovar. And when he mentioned Srila Gurudev's name, I was like, that's my Gurudev. And then he started telling me how when he was a young boy, Gurudev had stayed in the forest just behind Kusum for some time doing his bhajan. And every day this Pujari would go and see if there was anything Gurudev needed. And Gurudev would only ever ask for half a dry chapati per day. And he was telling me this with so much love and tears in his eyes. And then he said, but now Srila Gurudev has left. And he said, but he's not left. He's always with us. He's always here in Kusum Sarovar. And then he told me that he'd never officially received initiation from Srila Gurudev, but that without a doubt, Srila Gurudev was his guru. And that was a really immense moment for me, because not only did I feel like Gurudev had heard my sort of trepidation about coming back to Govardhan and feeling like, oh, am I going to feel really disconnected from him? And then without me actually even wanting to, he connects me to this Vaishnav who then continued, like goes on to glorify my Gurudev. But he showed me that his magnanimity in my own life was not limited to my life or the lives of the people I know, but actually had this like deeply powerful effect on the Brajbasis themselves. Those who are already so deep and qualified in their bhakti that they are born at Kusum Sarovar. And last few years, I've had the immense privilege to attend a Vrajmandal Parikrama with Srila Bhaktivedanta Puri Maharaj's Shri Krishna Chaitanya mission. And in 2019, it was actually, I think, can't remember if it was the appearance day or disappearance day of Srila Bhakti Jivan Janardhan Maharaj. They were throwing, that mutt was throwing a festival for him, and Srila Bhakti Vichar Vishnu Maharaj, who's one of the acharyas of that mutt, came to speak on Srila Janardhan Maharaj. But in his Harikatha, he ended up glorifying Srila Gurudeva for 20 minutes, because he started saying how in the late 80s, I think he said this particular one was in 1989, he would go on Vrajmandal Parikrama with Srila Gurudeva and Srila Janardhan Maharaj and all these other Vaishnavas who would gather together and do these amazing parikrams. And he said that it was in these parikrams that Gurudeva would really reveal who he was, and that he would enter the Dham, these holy tirthas, and then forget who he was in this world and forget his role as a sannyasi, and actually begin to show his bhavs and his moods. And he said that in one place that they went to, Srila Gurudeva turned to him, Srila Bhakti Vichar Vishnu Maharaj, and started speaking with this really intense bhav and saying, "You're dark like Krishna, so you shouldn't be here, but I'm light like Srimati Radhika, I'm on her side," and having this whole ras. And he said that when he first heard that, it really shocked him, and then he realized what was going on, that Srila Gurudeva had forgotten what was happening and where he was. He said that on another occasion, they went to Terrakadamba, where the cowherd boys used to have sticks with their fights with their cow herding sticks, and that as soon as they arrived, Srila Gurudeva stood up to speak, and when he stood up to speak, he immediately challenged Srila Bhakti Vichar Vishnu Maharaj to a danda fight. And when they were there, they ended up having this danda fight in that mood that Srila Gurudeva was bringing out of the Dham. So that's really what he did, is he opened up that world to us in a way that, like he said, it might take 100,000 lifetimes before we can even understand one tiny bit of it. But still, he gave it to us. And on one of those parikrams with Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mission, one of the first stops we made was to Yavat. And I had a really surprising experience there, where it had been a while since I'd visited, at least a decade, I think. Probably the last time I went there was 2007 or 2006. And then I went again in 2018. But I was blown away by how as soon as I stepped through the doorway into the Yavat courtyard, I was immediately brought back to the first time I went there with Srila Gurudeva in, I think, 97. And it felt as if nothing had changed, and really nothing had changed, not just the environment, but it felt as if Gurudeva was actually sitting there, as though he'd never left, as though he was there all along. And I really feel that he was, of course he is. And so to me, it feels like for many of us, even if we haven't had the opportunity to go to the Dham, but we've read about it, or we've seen the videos, or we've heard Gurudev speak about the Dham, a huge part of what connects us to Srila Gurudev is Vrajmandal Parikrama, is the Dham itself, because it's where he came alive, and it's where he brought Krishna's pastimes alive, and it's where he brought us alive as well. I think anyone who's been knows that, or feels that, however tough it is being in the Dham, especially in a Western body, there's nothing quite like it in terms of the connection one feels. And at the same time, even though it's really, it's easier to connect to Srila Gurudev in the Dham, it's not impossible to feel that same connection here. I feel like what Srila Gurudev wanted to establish was this deep heart connection. that meant that we would always be working towards like a constant state of bhajan. I can't say I'm even close to that. I mean, it's my misfortune that after so much physical association, I can say with complete certainty that I've never done any bhajan and I've never done any service. And I really, really mean that. But it doesn't mean that that's not what Gurudev was instilling in us and is still instilling in us, whether we're his disciple or his Shiksha disciple or we've never even met him. He wanted us to have this strong unity between us and himself and the Dham and the pastimes, but also the other Vaishnavas. When I had the honor to meet Srila Bharati Maharaj in 2013, and later many of the disciples of Srila Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj, like Srila Bhakti Kamal Govinda Maharaj, Bhakti Vichar Vishnu Maharaj, Bhakti Swarup Sridhar Maharaj and Bhakti Tilak Niskinj Maharaj, who all of them, along with Srila Bharati Maharaj and Srila Bhakti Vallabh Tirtha Maharaj too, actually, they, in meeting them and in hearing their Harikatha, it opened something up for me that kind of dispelled the, I guess, the depression of Gurudev's physical absence that one naturally feels in the years after his disappearance, which is that I could hear him through them again in many different ways. And this ability to connect, or this potential to stay connected to Gurudev and to feel him everywhere, comes through, I guess, an open-heartedness that he was also encouraging. I remember hearing a pastime, I'm sure everyone's kind of heard it now, about how one Srila Prabhupada disciple came to Gurudev and was really attracted to Gurudev, but kind of lamented that they'd already given their heart to Srila Prabhupada, and how was there space for Gurudev now? And Gurudev said something like, well, not only will you have to make space for me, but for all our parampara, and for every resident of Goloka Vrindavan, your heart will have to expand to that capacity. And I, to me, that's like the beauty of Srila Gurudev's apparent disappearance, because when he was physically present, at least for myself, even though I knew there were other Mahabhagavats on the planet, my whole focus was Srila Gurudev. Not to disregard anyone else, it just didn't even cross my mind. You know, we'd go to his festivals, we'd run after his car, we left the festival site and just went back to where he was staying. We were glued to him, and as Ramananda rightly pointed out, physical association is not real sadhu sangha, and yet I don't think any of us would give up those moments for anything else, because they do make an impression, especially when you're like a child or a teenager and listening to the Harikatha is difficult sometimes or whatever. It's that feeling of connection. And then when that physical presence seems to disappear, it's when we have the opportunity to actually try and follow what Srila Gurudev wanted, which is to sink into that heart space, to take what he said and nourish it within us, try to put it in practice in the relationships around us, which I know I haven't done, but as time goes on, I'm seeing more and more what I feel would please Srila Gurudev, from me at least, which is to actually be with the devotees and be with the Vaishnavas in the way that he was. How can I ever live up to that? But I can at least look to the example that he set of how he related to us, the affection, the compassion, the tolerance, the forgiveness, everything that he showed me and continues to show me, which I don't deserve. That's how he wanted us to be, and to expand our hearts. And we can only, at least for me, I guess I can only really do that in physical separation from Gurudev. Can I begin to really endeavor to find Gurudev everywhere around me, because I have to. I have to find him in other Vaishnavas. I have to find him in his books. I have to find him in the words of those who know him, and also the words of those who don't know him, who've never met him, never have a chance to connect to him, and still yet he speaks through them to us. I was always, as a teenager, I was really enamored by the classes that he gave in Badger, I think in 2005, on the 24 Gurus. And as time went on, I began to see why that meant so much to me, because in physical absence from Gurudev, we are pushed to see that actually the whole world is made up of him. He speaks through us. He speaks to us through everything and everyone, whether that's his disapproval or his encouragement. Having to go through something we really don't want to go through, even that is cherry-picked by Gurudev out of all of our karma, like something that he specifically wants us to learn. I remember him saying, I think it was in Germany, I really don't know where, he said that the Guru's mercy is such that we don't even live through all of our karma, that Gurudev chooses what we must live through. And he gives the example of a man who I think loses his toe or hurts his toe, but actually his karma was to lose his leg. And that's Srila Gurudev's mercy. We're not here in this material world suffering endlessly, we're suffering with a purpose. Like everything is there to help us move forward. And yeah, it really is about that heart. He said, I'm sure he said this to many, but he also specifically said to my mother that he wanted to make her heart very soft, like a flower, and then offer it to Srimati Radhika. I think it's separation from Gurudev that softens us in a way. Having his physical association strengthens us, gives us faith, emboldens us, gives us the capacity to do things that we didn't think we could do. And then it's the brutal shock of his separation and having to face the reality of who we really are that makes us softer, and that puts us in a position to understand that I am nothing without Srila Gurudev. This world is nothing without Srila Gurudev. And yet he is everything. He is this world. And to pray to come to a place where, just like he wanted my sister and I, he would always ask us, where is Krishna now? What is he doing now? To come to that place of thinking, where is Srila Gurudev now? What is Srila Gurudev doing now? And in that relationship that we have to him, that's how we're transported to Goloka Vrindavan. What service is he doing now? How can I connect to him now? How can I remember him now? And I say all this, and it's so far beyond my current process or capacity, but I feel like at least Gurudev's showing that this is what he wants, even if it takes 100,000 lifetimes. And I thought I'd just end on one note, which is that Yashodananda Prabhu mentioned how I had darshan of Gurudev in 1989. I actually didn't know that for a very long time. I only found that out a few years ago, after Srila Gurudev left. And I think on a subconscious level, I might have been dividing my life into before Srila Gurudev and after Srila Gurudev in my mind, because I could kind of see this way that life changed after meeting him. I imagine many devotees have done that before I met the devotees, after I met the devotees, or before I took initiation. I have it with Diksha as well, before I had Diksha and after I had Diksha. But when I heard that I'd actually had darshan of Srila Gurudev in 1989, it completely blew that concept away, because I realized, oh my God, without me knowing, I'd already met Srila Gurudev. I remember hearing that real initiation is the first time the Gurudev and the disciple actually meet and see each other. And the rest is formality. And in that sense, I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, I've always belonged to Gurudev. And then where do I draw the line? Because I was only 1 year old. It made me realize there is no life before Gurudev and life after Gurudev. There is no life while he was present and life after he was present. In a few weeks' time, it will be his 100th appearance day. But the reality is that there is the potential for us to see and experience Srila Gurudev's appearance again and again at every moment, in everything that we live through, in every lesson that we're made to learn, in every opportunity to serve or to try and just be better, to try and please him in some small way, because that's all we're capable of. And that meeting with Srila Gurudev in 1989 feels special to me, because the reason we met him was a year after I was born. My parents decided that they wanted to move to Mayapur. My father had been given a job to teach in the Gurukul, I think technology or computers, something like that. And we packed up our bags, left our flat in Amsterdam and flew to Mayapur. But soon after arriving, there was one sort of problem after another. Small things, really silly things, but enough to be asked to leave and for us to lose the opportunity to live there. Which I'd heard that story when I was younger, and I remember thinking, God, that's ridiculous that happened. But it was only after I realized that us being forced to leave Mayapur meant that we went to Vrindavan. And in Vrindavan, somehow my father, I think, was asking, in the words of my mother, he was nectar hunting, and he was trying to seek out the most exalted Vaishnavas. And I think he did. I don't know who else we had darshan of. I think a few of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers. But one of those darshans meant that we went to Mathura to meet Srila Gurudev. Obviously, I don't remember it. But in thinking about that, I realized that that is without a doubt Srila Gurudev's arrangement. We had a whole other life trajectory planned for us. And from one thing to the next, something went wrong, we're kicked out, blah, blah, blah. But we end up in his darshan, and it made me just feel that Gurudev's love and his protection extends even beyond the time that we ever met him. It was his agency that even allowed us to meet him in the first place. It was him choosing us out. And that applies to all of us, every single one of us. If you're not Srila Gurudev's disciple, it applies to Sri Guru, and it still applies to Srila Gurudev, but Srila Bharati Maharaja's disciples, Srila Prabhupada's disciples, the Vaishnavas come out of their unfathomable mercy and immediately take control of our lives before we've ever surrendered, before we've offered them our hearts. And they ask us for our hearts, but they've already taken them long before, and they already have control over our lives. And I think on that note, all I can say is that something that Srila Gurudev really showed me is I felt like he was always talking about Sharanagati. At least that's what I always picked up on. And part of that is seeing Krishna as our only maintainer and as our only protector. And that can be a little hard to have faith in sometimes. But through Srila Gurudev, through whoever our Gurudev is, through the Vaishnavas, it's become clear that the way to that level of Sharanagati is through understanding that Gurudev is our only protector and Gurudev is our only maintainer. And probably all of my experiences of Gurudev involve him showing me that in some way or another. And that he continues to do that at every moment to rescue me from my own self-made catastrophes. And so I pray, I really pray that I can realize this, that I can come to see and feel Gurudev everywhere, at all times, and in the hearts of everyone, to understand that each relationship to Srila Gurudev is unique and sacred and personal, that each devotee has their own journey, and that he is in complete control of everything. So in that sense, there's nothing to fear, there's nothing to worry about, because just as he told us that he wants to put us in his pocket, we actually already are all in his pocket. So yeah, I'll end on that note.
Sudevi, thank you, thank you so much. That was such a very intimate and very soft glorification. And although I can't see the room because most people have not got their cameras on, somehow on Zoom you can feel people's collective Shravan. And I felt that everybody was really touched by your sharing. And by the way, when Gurudev first came to your house, I remember it really well. So I remember the build-up, and your dad was very concerned because your mum was really in anxiety about having, because your mum's quite sort of reclusive. So the idea of having devotees descend on our house was just like a nightmare. And also she knew what devotees are like you open the door and you lose control. So she was in a lot of anxiety. And I think all her worst nightmares came true. In the sense of the whole party. I think it was more than 50 actually. But it was so blissful because Gurudev was at the center that everything worked out beautifully and she was pacified. It all worked out. But it was pretty crazy and very funny because it is in a part of Bath in England where these things don't normally. It's a very gentlemanly area. Budara, your camera's turned on. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, just that it was quite an experience. But the thing that really stands out with me is how we had about, I think, 10 devotees arrive with all the kitchen utensils and the fireplace and the charcoal, and they wanted to set up a kitchen in the back garden, this private back garden. So we had a job on our hands to try to convince them that this wasn't really a good idea. We had to find another kitchen somewhere else.
I think we lost our flat deposit after that as well, didn't we? I remember that.
We lost our flat deposit plus.
And Budara, I remember first washing Gurudev's feet at your house.
Yeah.
And that was a worrying moment because I'm a clumsy bear at the best of times. So I was, it was slightly, it was an amazing experience. But also, Sudevi, I thought your whole presentation was incredibly holistic, actually. You know, the way in which you see Gurudev, it's sort of Gurudev at the center, this complete protection of Srila Gurudev, and then how Srila Gurudev wanted us really not to have a religious experience or beyond even a spiritual experience. He wanted us to have an experience. He wanted, like you used the word experience a lot, but he wanted us to really experience through every aspect of our entire psyche and bodies. And that was encapsulated in the 2 parikrams, which you mentioned. And so that was incredibly beautiful, and how all of that built our faith. So I really related to that very deep internal narrative and how actually we can connect with Srila Gurudev in faith through those experiences, in separation now and for eternity, and that we've always been with Gurudev and we always will be with Gurudev. So it was an incredibly whole with a W and holistic summary of everything that we remember and relate to Gurudev. So thank you so much. That was super beautiful. Really appreciate it.